Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour, Annie, hola, salve, ni hao, namaste. How many of you recognize at least 3 of those languages? 4? All of them? Well, my apologies if I mispronounced any of them. I wish I actually spoke that many languages. But those 7 languages are tiny drops in the vast ocean of over 7,000 languages spoken worldwide, with an even greater number of dialects. Each one brilliant, complex, unique, each a piece of art, a product of centuries upon centuries of cultivation. I always smile whenever I'm unexpectedly greeted with ni hao, which is Mandarin in my mother tongue. Now, imagine that one day we would all share the same tongue on Earth. It's not unlikely when every 2 weeks a language disappears, and of those existing, half have less than 1,000 speakers. I might sound a bit crazy to say that we're moving towards a world with one tongue, but there have been in fact many attempts to establish a global language, ranging from English, the standard in global affairs, to Esperanto, an international auxiliary language intended to foster better understanding between members of different nationalities. So some define language as a system of communication, and in that sense, I guess it is justifiable for us to all share the same language if all we want to accomplish is to get things done in the most efficient way. But then we ask ourselves, why do we enjoy things like poetry when we can get the same point across in less than 5 words possibly? And why do we call language an art and associate it with other forms of art like delicate sculptures and beautiful melodies if it's just plain text on white paper? So today, I want to share with you some of my thoughts on this fabulous thing that we use on a daily basis, yet often overlook: our languages. I was first introduced to the idea of a universal language in grade 8. At the time, I had only been in Canada for a year, with the broken English not even half as fluent as it is today. So perhaps, if there was a universal language, I wouldn't have to try to guess which menu option sounds safer at restaurants, or search up every other word in the books I read, or pretend that I know exactly what my friends are saying when they ask with that wicked smile, "Do you have a crush?" Yet, I remained conflicted about the idea. If there was a universal language, would it be English, the language used in many official documentations, yet only 5% of our world's population speak natively? Or would it be Mandarin, the language with the most speakers, yet complained by many for its complexity? Or would it be Esperanto, a language intended to be easy to learn, yet failed to be implemented successfully? And so I asked myself these questions. If I lived in a world with one tongue, would I be able to appreciate the elegance of Chinese calligraphy and the poeticism of Shakespeare like I do today? I often hear 3 main arguments that support having a universal language. The first one: learning languages is a waste of time and effort. In our fast-paced and success-oriented society, we tend to focus on what seems efficient and useful. It frustrates me to hear children of Chinese descent say that they're learning the language only because it might help them to secure a job in the future. Yes, that is one of the benefits of being multilingual, but there's something profoundly magnificent and heartwarming about one's mother tongue, what I call like a freshly brewed cup of tea on a snowy winter day. Language and culture are truly intertwined and inseparable. I am fond of Chinese poetry, but those lines lose their charm when translated. At the same time, the short stories by Mark Twain and Jack London are far more clever and vivid in English. Language is comprised of meaning, culture, history, style, sound, tone, emotion, imagination, and so much more. And unfortunately, the only thing that can be translated is a meaning, which is why many translations are not same as the original text. Every language lost is a piece of culture lost. It's not to say that a global language will completely replace all the other languages, but if introduced, our future generations will likely favor it for its convenience. What a pity would be if one day our descendants can no longer appreciate the comfort of their mother tongue and the vast wisdom of their ancestors. The second argument for universal language is that different languages hinder scientific and economic development. However, with universal systems established across disciplines and with the emergence of AI technology, professionals and researchers across borders are able to communicate with relative ease. Speakers of different languages also tend to have different systems of thinking, and this collaboration of ideas in fact helps technology and innovation to advance. Another challenge is that if there is to be a universal language, the difficulty of delivering it to remote areas is undeniable. For instance, many countries include English as a part of their school curriculums, yet members of the less developed rural areas don't even have access to a well-structured education, let alone English education. These communities will likely become even more isolated and have even less opportunities if they don't have the adequate training to become proficient in a language spoken everywhere else. The third argument for having a universal language is that different languages cause miscommunication and hostility. But when we look back at our history, many conflicts are rooted not in the difference in language, but in the discrimination against gender, race, religion, and social status. Residential schools, one of the darkest events in Canadian history, is an example of where a population is forbidden to speak their language to be assimilated. Many survivors and their children has lost a connection to their cultures, and many Indigenous languages in Canada became extinct. Those who underwent the trauma of residential schooling were punished for speaking their mother tongues, and so they refused to share the traditional languages with their children in fear of them having a similar experience. As a result, over 2/3 of the 70 Indigenous languages that still exist in Canada are endangered, with few speakers over the age of 65. This is an example of an attempt to eradicate differences between us that led to a tragedy in history. Unity and uniformity are quite distinct. Unity is defined as being formed of parts that constitute a whole, implying that its foundation lies within diversity. If there is to be a universal language, is it not in a way deeming it superior to others? Sharing the same tongue does not foster equality in the world, because there shouldn't be any inequality between speakers of different languages to start with. Even if we all share the same tongue, discrimination can still find its way through characteristics like gender and race. As agreed by many, the only way we can truly foster equality in the global community is not by eliminating our differences, but by recognizing, respecting, embracing, and celebrating them. And so I encourage all of you to learn and find more about your mother tongue, if you don't already speak it fluently, because it will not only help you to understand the conversations your aunts have at family gatherings, but also open your eyes to beautiful culture that you can then take part in preserving. I ask you to restrain your laughter when you hear a foreign word that sounds just a bit funny, because it's really not to someone else. And I hope that you will all be able to appreciate the exquisite artifacts from different cultures that you come across, because they're just as valuable and precious as the ones from your own. As a former ESL student, I understand the challenge of adapting to a new environment. However, it is also through this transformative experience that I gained a greater appreciation for the beauty of the Chinese culture and the elegance of the English language, as well as the remarkable diversity in Canada. When seeing a mother tongue-themed art exhibit, I realized how amazing it feels to have a language that I affectionately call my mother tongue. And in that moment, I understood artist Edmond de Waal's words: with languages, you are at home anywhere. Whether it is English or Chinese, I speak it with pride and confidence because it is a part of my identity. Each language is beautiful not only for its intelligence, but also for the human emotion in every word and every tone. While there are some benefits to having a universal language, the different languages we have right now are not barriers, but bridges. They connect past to the present, thought to voice, and mind to heart. As Nelson Mandela has said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. Thank you for listening. 谢谢。